Not long after I started attending Moody Church, about 20 years ago now, I met someone who I later came to realize was one of God's special assignments for us. My first impressions of him were of a guy not too far removed from a street person, unkempt, needy, rambling, and sometimes a pest. But as it turned out, this was someone whom God would use to teach me about the church's most fundamental ministry, the ministry to its weakest members. So here was someone who, because of his tragic past, was helpless in a sense that I hadn't before imagined. I discovered that this was not a person I could ignore, as I would sometimes ignore a beggar on the street. He'd been a Moody Church member from a young age since the 1960s, and it just didn't seem appropriate to let such a long-term member slip through the cracks just because his was a difficult case.
Our friend really has no family to speak of his own. Moody Church really is his family, and he suffered a great deal, pretty much his life long. I think on any given Sunday, I'm not really certain that even his shoes and clothes that he's wearing actually belong to him personally. I've seen God's work in our friend's life in a number of ways, and I think the reason it's really precious to me is because no one really sees it or knows about it. And he really is one of the least of these that Christ speaks of and champions on his behalf. We try to encourage our friend that when he maybe loses his glasses for the 100th time, and now the staff at the nursing home have to read scripture to him, that actually is a really good thing, and that perhaps that worker may never pick up a Bible and read it, and or when he went through a particularly difficult season where he had been falling a lot and coming to church, and the staff decided to send someone with each week. That here again, several members were coming that might never have heard the gospel or stepped into a church.
I think I've learned through this that God's priorities start from the bottom up and not from the top down. The less presentable parts of the body receive special attention from him, even though it's not always apparent to us. And I think that our priorities should reflect this, because our testimony to the world depends on how we care for one another.
So I think of the passage in James chapter 1 about visiting the orphan that we're quite familiar with, and the word visit actually means to impart life. And so that's our hope, that we're able to impart some life to our friend, and God blesses us through that as well in many ways. And he takes their plight a very personal way. God calls himself the father to the fatherless and the defender of the orphan, and has a special regard for them. And we need to as well. And so I also think of the scripture in Proverbs that speaks of being a voice for those who cannot speak up for themselves. And so we just hope that we're able to do this, and we thank God for the opportunity to love our friend in these small ways.